You can either be in control of your mind or controlled by your mind. We control our state rather than waking up, going throughout our day, hoping to be in a good state, hoping to be in a good mood. You can control that. Whether I'm in a good state or a bad state is 100% my fault, 100% under my control. You can always influence it. And making your mind your slave, your servant, is the appropriate relationship. It's the appropriate chain of command.
JP, welcome to the Me Mafia podcast.
Harry, Brett, thank you for having me.
We're pumped to have you on.
Dude, I'm glad to be here, increasing our xenoestrogen content together. We can become the men that a lot of women swimmers want to be.
Cheers to that.
Yeah, cheers.
Salute. Sometimes you need to microdose a little bit of the poison, you know?
Yeah, I'd imagine, and this is complete bro science, so it's probably true. It probably builds like immunity. Here's the microdose of the poison, so your body becomes accustomed to it and then stores the poison for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So checks out to me.
I'm here for that.
Well, I think our T is so high, we actually have to bring it down a little bit.
For a level playing field, I've been trying to do that too. I just feel sorry for the rest of humanity.
Yeah. Did you see that? I saw this headline 3 weeks ago. Aren't they actually finding microplastics in guys' penises? Have you seen that?
I haven't done a lot of research on guys' penises lately.
I guess I've really gone down the rabbit hole.
But no, I mean, from what I understand, the microplastics are just embedded in the body, but I didn't hear the penis one specifically.
Well, you know how it is on social media where it's like these headlines just go insanely viral. Yeah. So there's this brand, we know the founder really well, Nad. So they make it's like a cotton and wool based underwear.
Oh, yeah.
And so they shared that because they're literally finding plastics. You saw that.
And are the plastics in the penises coming from like regular underwear or coming in from the oral route? Or
I think it's just the polyester, because you're just like bathing in polyester 24/7.
Yeah.
Like, so you're going to the gym, you're getting a great workout in, but then you're kind of like, it's almost like you're just ingesting these toxins by the clothing you put on your skin.
Pores are opening, and interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like people don't even realize how much, well, there's so much fear porn on the internet, but like how much toxins there are, how many toxins there are out there.
Yeah, it's like they're almost just hiding in plain sight. And instead of asking what's toxic, because that's a very long, exhaustive list and discovery, it's maybe better to ask, like, in my life, what isn't toxic? Assume everything is, but what isn't?
Totally.
Yes. And also that mindset of, it's interesting on social media how there's been so much good spotlight being pushed on, seed oils, ultra processed food, et cetera. But it's like just the environment that we live in, perfection isn't the end goal. And you see a lot of people where their whole focus is avoiding exposures. Yeah. And the theme that we've explored more is just this concept of resilience of like, you're not going to be perfect. Like, let's really invest in our health so that like, if you are exposed to like polyesters or plastic water bottles, like you're going to be okay. Like the body's also really resilient too.
I love that relaxed mindset. It's not like a relaxed mindset out of passivity, but there's proactiveness. We're going to do the best we can without ruining our lives through mental stress about what's around, but we're also not going to ignore it. And I've been really into health and nutrition for like 25 years. Since I was 18, that's what I started off doing before comedy. And I think a lot of people go through phases, and there's a phase usually in the first chunk of like getting into it where you get obsessive compulsive, where you become a control freak, you become a pain in the ass to everybody else around you. I'm not going to eat there, or I need to have a 30-minute conversation with the waiter and instruct the chefs how to do something different, or I'll be dehydrated instead of drinking the only water available. And what I realized about myself is, if I look at myself as a holistic being, which I think we are, body, mind, it's all connected, how much negativity how much net negativity versus positive progression am I giving myself? And I think like, cool, I was making great strides, living 100% clean in all the ways, living like a monk and eating like a monk. But then the stress I would feel by obsessing about it, worrying about it, social withdrawal, because like there's some things that are a social disconnect. I looked at it and realized I think I'm in the net negative right now. I need to loosen up, and so much about life, maybe everything, like it's you don't find the way forward in the extremes, worry about nothing or worry about everything. I think there truly is a balance in between.
Do you really think that there's a balance? I feel like our small subsect of crazy people like has to go through that rite of passage. Do you think that you have to go through that rite of passage of like being crazy in order to be healthy?
Oh yeah, I do. I think you have to find your own way. Like if someone walked in this room and we could like impart all our years of experience onto them, it wouldn't really mean much because they need to find their own journey so that when they kind of settle into their path of what's sustainable for them, they have to know this is my path. I think we're all delusional, just like we're told money can't make you happy.
Yeah.
We've all heard that before we had any more than $1,000 in our bank account, but we're all like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I gotta see. I think it can make me happy. So I do think we have to kind of do the young man's foolish things in order to not act like a wise person, but actually become a little bit more of a wiser person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's almost a good thing to like push it to the extreme and then taper back, because I feel so many people in modern society are wired to probably operate at like 10 to 20% of your maximum potential.
Yeah.
So it's probably better to err on the side of like push it and then taper back and find that healthy balance, right?
I would agree. Yeah, society doesn't need to be told like try less hard. That's going to be better.
Yes.
No, go for it. Try to be out of balance.
Yes.
It's going to help push them into balance.
Yeah. I mean, you saw that a lot in the beginning of COVID, which is probably a really good point to start to dig into some stuff. Is I remember it's wild to put yourself back into 2020. And I remember seeing so much content on social media. Yeah. Around like, this is such a stressful time. Like, don't worry, like order food, watch Netflix. And I felt like so many people were collectively like, now I have this societal sign to kind of give in to all these like inner feelings that I've wanted to do, but it was never really societally accepted until 2020, which is like super interesting how we're just so wired to latch on to those feelings,
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're wired to latch on to feelings of being a victim. And what COVID wanted us to be was victims in all the ways. And one of the ways that was expressed is like, yeah, life is really stressful. Order the stuff. We'll keep the liquor stores open. Make sure you're drinking to feel better about yourself. So I think when we're not like using our own really conscious North Star as our compass, the influences of society, including all the things with COVID, they push you into the role of being a victim. Is it designed that way, or is that just the path of least resistance? I don't know, but you can't be a victim and a master at the same time. And I think COVID taught a lot of people to be victims, whether it's victim of a virus or victim of your own life. It was a good time.
Yeah, it like you were saying, Brad, it kind of gave people like an easy way out to just kind of be like, oh, well, this is just happening.
Yeah.
And play that victim card. But you were one of the few people who I feel like turned up the boldness scale. You were just like doubling down on putting out content and speaking the truth. Was there like a cognitive, did you have a thought or like a turning point where you're like, oh, I really need to actually speak up because other people aren't?
Yeah, I did. For the first few weeks of COVID, I thought I was just doing what I normally do, which usually means I'm using my comedy to point out egotistical nature in people in different realms in one way or another. And then it's like, okay, now there's COVID. Look at what they're doing on the news, some of this tyranny stuff. Like, okay, I'll just do the same thing, but at that. And then fairly early on, I put out a video called What It's Like to Believe Everything the TV Tells You, or Everything the News Tells You. And to my surprise, that one went pretty damn viral. And that's when I started seeing, because there was a lot of backlash. There were smear articles written about me based on that video. Some of the comments, overwhelming support, yet some of the comments you could see like people are really against someone who's speaking out for freedom and suggesting that there can be lies and corruption coming from the news. People are outraged that if you call a pharmaceutical company profit motivated and potentially corrupt. The same pharmaceutical company that has paid the largest criminal fine in U.S. history, $2.3 billion, which literally makes them a criminal organization. If you suggest they might not be completely altruistic, you get backlash. So that video helped me wake up like, okay, there's a fork in the road here. I can do the thing that a lot of people have said you never do. You never divide your audience. You never get into politics. And like freedom became a political issue. It's like, well, this is my number one value. I need to speak on its behalf. So there was that fork in the road choice, play it safe or be true to myself and play it dangerously. And it wasn't really a choice. It's like, I can't betray myself. I can't not follow my heart. And that definitely made me more bold and more fierce because there was more resistance than usual. You know, cancel culture was relatively new on the scene. And it's like, well, this cancer, it might kill people. Now we look at cancel culture and realize, no, it only works if you consent to it. But the interesting thing is, you know, just like in the gym, the muscle can only be as strong as the weight is heavy. And I found having resistance to what I was saying in the beginning of COVID made me a lot stronger. It made me a lot more true to myself. And if you look at like an archetypal example of this, Jordan Peterson, that dude has gotten way more bold with what he has to say over the past 4 years. They try to cancel him all the time. They try to shut down his live events. They try to protest him. They smear him. He only gets stronger because of, I believe it's because if someone's acting on principle, if you resist them, one, they're a principled person. They're not going to abandon it because you intimidate them. They will only get stronger because now you are the resistance, making the muscle of them stronger. So I'm no Jordan Peterson, but that same sort of pattern, I think, was at work with me and making me more bold with what I had to say during COVID.
Definitely. Yeah, there's definitely very similar principles to you guys. And it seems like from our perspective, your talent stack is not just comedy, but also courage too. And you were one of those guys where there was almost like a linear correlation between the more bold and courageous you were with your content, the more your follower base was increasing. Because in 2020, 2021, especially with both Harry and I living in the Northeast, if you felt the way that the three of us feel, you really felt like you were on an island. Like everyone was vaccinated. If you worked at a corporate job, everyone was pushing it. There was silencing of this agenda. So to be able to find people through social media that you've never met, where you're like, look, I'm not on an island. There's a lot of other people that think this way. For us, that's why we really leaned into your content too. And I'm just curious, JP, when you were first starting to get backlash, was that a sign of like, hey, I'm doing something right, now I need to lean in because it feels uncomfortable getting that backlash? I'm just curious because so many people struggle with criticism. So I'd love to know how you dealt with that.
Yeah, you know, I'm grateful to say I think I dealt with it well. And I tend to function very logically. So I can look at criticism and I'm not losing my poop over it, taking it personally. At this point, I'm 43 years old. If I was 23, I'd have a much harder time because, like a lot of people, I was more of an approval addict when I was younger, which means I'll betray myself to get someone else's approval. You go through living hell trying to say what you need to say if you're an approval addict because you lose no matter what. But when I would look at it like, okay, this backlash, I know I have my blind spots. Let me look at this. So smear articles coming out just with these outrageous things like, well, he said this about vaccines, so he's racist, homophobe, misogynistic. I'm like, that's so far off base if I analyze myself. Like if they would have dialed that back 80%, maybe they could have got me to like question myself, but it's just like, he's a serial killer. Objectively not. But also, you know, I know who to trust in my life. So if a close friend of mine, and you know, we don't have yes men relationships, we have real relationships. If a close friend of mine says, JP, I see this about you. I'm not sure if you've noticed it, but can we take a look at this together? It's like, hell yeah, I have my blind spots. But if I look at where the backlash is coming from, who is that person? Do they look like a mentally unstable person on TikTok? Is it Vice Media, which is just a leftist, crappy news organization? Cool. Like if they said something good about me, then I should worry. I should worry. Like, why would the bad guys say that? So with that said, and all the while doing my best to be really in tune with myself, like, what do I really think? What do I really feel? Where's my heart guiding me? With kind of all that rambling lumped together, it helped me navigate backlash. And even to this day, when I get backlash, helps me navigate it really without my pulse elevating one beat. It's just, kind of being able to function logically rather than emotionally would be an asset to me.
I can't help but think about how all this kind of ties back to health too. Like, you prioritize your health and are able to kind of weather those storms. But on the other side, I don't want to say this as like a judgmental thing, but it's like a lot of these people who are throwing criticism online, you do a little digging there and you see immediately like, all right, this person doesn't seem like they're all that well. So it's interesting how at the bottom of all this is just this basis of how do you take care of yourself.
And how you do one thing is oftentimes how you do everything. And if someone presents like a very mangled physical degeneration appearance, like, no judgment, I'm not going to shame them, but that's them showing you how healthy they are physically. And there's such a high connection to one's mental health, not to suggest they've got some diagnosable mental disease, but just like we can be physically unwell and not have a diagnosed disease, a lot of people mentally, they don't have the neurotransmitter capacity to have a peaceful, balanced demeanor. Their autonomic nervous system isn't balanced enough to be parasympathetic when that would be ideal. They're in the sympathetic fight or flight response, so they're online just fighting all day.
Yes.
And it's like, that's a lot of them are just really unhealthy people expressing unhealthy behavior.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go for it.
No, I was going to say, you reminded me when you brought up Vice News. I don't know if you know this, but we were actually at the same bison harvest at Rome Ranch that you were at last December. So we didn't get to connect, but we remember we're seeing you and everything. And they had the Vice News crew at that bison harvest.
Really?
They were supposed to be doing a video on like red meat consumption, regenerative agriculture. And you could tell from the time you saw the entire crew that like just the scowl on their face, the physiognomy, they had already had their mind up on what that event was. And obviously for the three of us that are there and the thousands of people that have gone, it's like this truly beautiful experience of them harvesting these animals, getting connected to your food system, especially for people that have never ranched or hunted. Like, it's literally as connected as you can get
it's
to
very
life and death.
Sacred.
Yes. And I remember the one thing that Taylor and Katie from Rome Ranch always say is to not capture the killing itself. Like, don't take a picture, don't take a video, just take it in. The first thing that the video shows after they created the YouTube video was like the animal getting shot, it falling down. It was this huge hit piece. So that was our like tangible example of like, we've actually met these people and there was no nuance to this at all.
Man, I wish Katie and Taylor would have asked me about Vice News before that. There's just no way they're gonna do anything good.
No integrity.
No, I had maybe a year ago, I had a Vice News person reach out to me like, hey, we're doing an article on you. We'd love to have you comment on a couple things. And they didn't say it's a smear article, but I know what Vice News is. I'm like, anything I say, they will do their best to twist. So I didn't respond. A month or two later, the smear article comes out, and it was just fun to read.
Yeah.
It was just fun.
What did it say? JP Sears declined to comment or something like that?
No, I mean, it didn't say that, but it just had JP Sears. He's an anti-vaxxer. He's a COVID denier. And so far, I'm like, okay, at least that's accurate. But then, racist, transphobe, misogynist, and, he does things with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Robert Malone. I'm like, yeah, a couple heroes. Of course I do. So it's weird. A lot of it, I'm like, I agree with what you wrote. You're just presenting it like it's a real bad thing. And then shortly thereafter, Vice News goes bankrupt because they are worthless. And then shocker, George Soros buys them up. That makes a lot of sense. So anyway, like Vice, like anything we consume mentally, news or on social media, it's got a nutritional value. And a lot of that is just junk food. It'll take more vitality out of us than what it gives us. So, but if you find someone online, you know, Vice News, okay, that is just like you're eating Frosted Flakes. But then you listen to Russell Brand, like, okay, that's like an organic apple. That's got something in it.
Totally. Yeah, it's so true. I think we both went through a shift of how we consume social media after we started putting stuff out there, just like through the podcast, posting podcast clips and starting to get a little bit more bold with what we were putting out there, and just realizing that we can curate our timeline to the point where it's just full of Russell Brands and you and Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And then at that point, it's like pretty healthy diet of what you're consuming. But the internet is so interesting where you can kind of just fall into it. I see how like the other side or other people might fall into traps of just consuming the garbage, and that's just a death spiral.
Yep. If that's all you see, you can start to fool yourself into believing that's the reality, but it's just your feed curated and algorithms then showing you other stuff in line with that, where it doesn't show you reality. It just shows you one color of reality.
Definitely.
What do you make of just our relationship with technology and how that's changed just our ability to kind of think freely and really just detach from all the noise out there?
Yeah, you know, it's I having an open mind, I have to acknowledge at times I feel like an old crotchety man. Like, oh, change, that's bad.
Yeah.
Like we used typewriters when I was a kid. So so I know there's a part of me that naturally has a defiant resistance, and I don't like that to kind of govern me, but I notice that is in me. But hopefully with an open mind, I look at a lot of technology, and I think we need to remind ourselves just because something can be done doesn't mean it should be done in our lives. Just because like iPhone 16 can do 35 new things that you'll probably never use doesn't necessarily mean that would be a benefit for you to use just because you can. So I think we're in a phase where a lot of technology is being used just because it can be used, because it's new. But I think and it's not going to slow down. So I think to help keep the sovereignty over our own lives, we need to start asking ourselves, and everybody does this piece of technology serve me? Does it serve a purpose? What is that purpose? If so, great, use it. And if not, like, cool, don't weigh yourself down. Don't disconnect from yourself just for the sake of using something that you can. So I look at technology, whether it's like a Whoop strap or the latest AI stuff or a self-driving car. To me, technology, it's a tool. And to just believe it's a constructive tool, I think that's inaccurate. To believe they're all destructive, I think that's inaccurate. The tool has power potential. Is that power going to be used constructively or destructively? The answer is it can do both. But how would it be applied in your life, and what's the effect? So that's how I look at it. And also I find for myself, the more Amish I can live, the happier I am.
They're incredible.
We are radically pro Amish on this podcast.
Yeah.
Dude, they sell some cocaine butter.
Do they?
I'm from Ohio, and apparently there were scandals decades ago of like the Amish people trafficking cocaine.
No way.
Because the cops would never look in their horse and buggies, and how they got corrupted by the mob or
Just
drug
like
traffickers.
the one bad Amish person.
All Amish people do cocaine. That's the message.
That's the message.
But luckily, they won't be watching this.
Yeah.
They won't be watching.
They won't be
No.
mad.
What a life. They have no idea what's going on in this whole other world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those stupid Amish, they just don't know.
Just eating raw butter, drinking raw cream, riding horse bareback.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a company out of Ohio called, have you heard of Sisu Sauna? They're actually based out of Ohio. They make these really high quality saunas in Ohio. And I think a lot of their supply chain is actually Amish, right?
Fully Amish.
Yeah. I think that's
Amish
why they're so good.
craftsmanship.
Amish craft.
Amish craft.
You guys,
Right on.
side note, have you guys seen the video of just the Amish building a barn?
No.
I'll send you.
I'd imagine it's impressive.
It's unbelievable. It's like 30 of them, and they put it up in like a day.
Dang.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
They're like, they organize like ants. It's just, they're so productive.
That's incredible. And I'd imagine there's a lot I would benefit from, like actually living truly Amish for a little period of time. Like,
Yeah.
how much of more of a man would you become? Like, your life is much more in your hands. It's not outsourced to Whole Foods. Like, you're hunting,
Yes.
you're farming, you're building your shelter. Like, I don't know how to do a lot of that, but I imagine just like when I went on my first hunt, and I'm still not a good hunter, but when I went on my first hunt, I connected to a piece of my manhood that I didn't know was there. Like, oh, now I'm not completely incapable of doing this very primal thing. And even though I don't need to do it, I feel just like more of a man having experienced this.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost like a piece. It's almost like you realized there was maybe a piece of you missing, and you consciously like felt that and experienced it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We should start a new company, guys. Like an Amish app for the phone. So you go on the app, and every day it gives you a new way to be Amish. Implemented through technology. That's a joke.
Amish-ish, like how to like get a little bit more
Not
Amish.
completely, but
Yeah,
Amish-ish.
you just want to be on the fringe. It's so interesting though. I actually feel like a lot of guys, I don't know if this is just a post-COVID trend, but like a lot of guys are trying to like tap into just that whole side of themselves, at least people that I know in Austin and people leaving the cities.
It appears that way to me. I think, and I do correlate it with COVID. I mean, I know for me that like being more bold with what I have to say, that's a man thing. Wanting to learn how to hunt, that's a man thing. Bought my first gun, took gun lessons, took sheepdog protector course. Like, cool. Why am I so motivated to be a man? And I think COVID was the motivator, where there, to a degree, some of the stuff that happened, but also the threat of what could happen with COVID. Like, okay, the food supply is not in my control as it is, and protecting my family. So, and I think also if someone was halfway awake, you look at a lot of the dudes portrayed in the media and we see that's a weak, that's a weak dude. That's a beta male, no judgment. Just like, that's not a man. That's Bill Gates wearing a sweater vest, for crying out loud.
I was just about to ask you, who do you have in mind right now?
Guilty, Bill Gates.
Yeah.
And then also I think we've woken up the crusade, I would call it the propaganda crusade of labeling masculinity as toxic.
Yeah.
Like, labeling good masculinity as toxic. Now, cool, like a dude abusing his wife or belittling people, that's toxic masculinity. By the way, there's also toxic femininity, but they're like masculine, good, healthy expressions of masculinity. There's been so much propaganda to label that as toxic. That's just like saying breathing is toxic. So I think we've seen that enough that a good thing has happened. People have woken up to the lie and realized, oh, they're telling men to behave like women. They're also telling women to behave like men. That's the feminist movement. So the more they've been telling men to behave like women, that one, doesn't seem like it works, and two, it really seems like a lie. So the opposite of what they say is where I'm probably going to spend more of my energy. So yeah, I think we're trying to make masculinity great again. I see it happening more and more.
Definitely.
Yeah. It reminds me of that statistic. I think they did a study on a bunch of families that went to church, and with the family, if the mother was pushing the whole family to go to church, I think 15% of all families continue to go to church for an extended period of time. If the father pushed it, it was like 80 or 90%, like something ridiculous. So to your point, it's like the impact that the father has on the family and being truly masculine in a good, healthy way, like you're talking about, these are just like fundamental truths that we're just forgetting within society.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
They're good to remember, though.
They're good to remember. One of the things that I wanted to ask you is, what do you do on a daily basis that keeps you as humble and as grounded as you are? Because I feel like even though we're just getting to know each other, just the way that you show up in the studio, or when you shake someone's hand for the first time, I think you start to get this sense of who someone is, and we're asking great questions, asked us what our names were, you were curious about the show. I don't know, there's just like this humbleness and grounding that I think kind of exudes from you. And I'm just curious, what do you do to cultivate that?
Yeah. Thank you for noticing my humbleness. I'm probably the most humble person you'll ever meet, bro. Yeah. I think whatever degree of humbleness and grounding I have, there's maybe a few different things that contribute to it. There's the long-term approach. For probably 23 years, I've been doing self-growth work. So learning about myself and not buying into the stories I tell myself. And, if there was just one psychological insight alone that has helped me more than anything to check my ego some of the time, be maybe a little bit humble, it's don't believe everything you think. Just because a story comes up in your mind, have the humbleness to know this is a story I have. May or may not be true. What I know for certain is it's a story I have. I have my perception. Other people have their perception. I think arrogance would say my perception is what's real. Then you become a tyrant. You become run by your ego, and you're probably a pain in the ass to other people in your life, but you're really in a living hell with yourself. But realizing other people have a different perception, I can be curious. I don't need to be certain. I won't believe everything I think. And if you have your beliefs, we need those. But if you can not believe everything you think, then you're into what Eckhart Tolle would say, you're automatically in the observer of your mind, not the participant. And when you're the observer, you're going to be way more chill because you're watching a movie and you're watching a movie. But if you're the participant, I believe everything I think, I have my story, this is what's real, then you're watching a movie, but you think it's real. So the characters are, getting in a gunfight, you're stressed because you think it's real. So being the observer, just through that one mantra of don't believe everything I think, that really helps me. Also, I find, the long-term journey of getting to my unresolved issues, the hidden pain, hidden traumas. I know we like to call everything traumas nowadays. It's like, no, you're stressed, you pussy. But like helping resolve some of those things, some of the childhood stuff, I think that helps loosen you up and grounds you into reality rather than being stuck in a past reality, which is ungrounding. And then, man, on the short term, more the daily practices, the abstract way to say it is like taking care of my health is very helpful for being grounded, being a little more humble. I find exercise for me is my best mental health practice. Like if you're exercising hard, filled with lactic acid on the assault bike, doing a circuit, whatever you're doing, you are feeling your body and feeling your feelings, feeling sensations. That's a great grounding practice. And just exercising hard, that serves up an opportunity to feel your body in a nice potent dose.
Yeah, it's almost like there's certain things where, like when those emotions pop up, you're like, I'm not going to rationalize my way out of this. I almost just need a state change. Yeah. So there's sometimes where I've noticed if I'm like overthinking something or, the work that I need to do isn't getting done, I'm like, I'm better off just like getting a workout in or a cold plunge or a sauna. And then it's like you just have that pop and you're good to go after.
100%. Yeah. On my bad days, I'll buy into the rationalization of, well, do my workout now before all the work's done. I don't have time, or I've got a cold plunge too, taking 5 minutes to go out and do that. I don't have time. But I find nowadays, hopefully most of the time, I actually abide by the inner wisdom. Like, yeah, go do that. The state change you get, you go back to the work, the quality of it is so much better. And it just seemingly happens way quicker. So it's like taking time to get yourself grounded, the workout or the cold plunge. It looks like a time expense, but it's like, yeah, it's a net time saver most of the time for me.
Yeah, I definitely used to be the type of person that would just work myself into just work until the quality's like at 10%. And it's like, dude, you gotta change it up. Like the cold plunge has been massive, just like a quick sauna or a quick workout. Yeah. It's like incredible what that change of mindset can do, just on like quality of work, and honestly like entering into relationships too, just quality of just how you're showing up for other people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've done some work with Tony Robbins, and he's big on the term state change. And he educates people. It seems so simple. Like doesn't everybody know this? But like I didn't know it. But reminding people, you can either be in control of your mind or controlled by your mind. You're going to be better off making your mind your slave. So we control our state rather than waking up, going throughout our day, hoping to be in a good state, hoping to be in a good mood. He's like, no, you can control that. And he gives you practices, and there's other practices. But what I found is, yeah, whether I'm in a good state or a bad state, it's 100% my fault, 100% under my control. You can always influence it. And making your mind your slave, your servant, is, I think, the appropriate relationship. It's the appropriate chain of command.
Do you have any spiritual practices that you do?
Yeah, I meditate for like 9 hours every day, so nothing big.
Nothing too crazy.
Currently, I would say, honestly, no. Well, actually, like praying before meals, just like simple, dear God, thank you for this food, gratitudes. That would be a practice. I've over 23 years or so evolved through different spiritual practices, and much like health, being obsessive compulsive about it, I would do that with different spiritual stuff. And now I think my biggest spiritual practice, which doesn't really seem like a practice, it's my perspective. Seeing everything when bad stuff's happening, asking, what's the opportunity here? What's the blessing within this curse? What's the purpose of this? Doing my best to be in touch with myself. Where's my heart trying to guide me on this decision? Or if it's trying to offer me a new thing, can I have the courage to hear it and act on it? So for me, the spiritual practice is a bit more integrated into life. And if you live in Southern California, wear white and mala beads, you wouldn't be impressed with my spiritual practice. And I wouldn't be impressed with their spiritual practices either.
Yeah. So it's almost like constant connection with God as you go throughout your day, and like asking for discernment and maybe some of these character traits versus this like 10-step spiritual routine or something like that.
Yeah. And that says it really well for me. And I don't try to position myself like, well, I'm above the practices now, so no. I'm all integrated.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's just where I'm at. And also I think the purpose of a practice is so that you don't need that practice anymore. So you integrate it, just kind of like functional weight training. If you're an athlete, the purpose isn't to be in the gym lifting heavier weights, doing more dynamic movements. The purpose of that is to have a carryover onto the playing field so that you're better where it really counts. So I think that's probably what I'm trying to do now with my spiritual practices.
I'm reading this book right now called The Way of the Victorious, and they describe this topic. I think it's what you're talking about, is like having a heart as soft as clay, but then a mind and body as sharp as iron. It's like, I feel like that's where I'm trying to navigate my life too as well, where it's like you can pull yourself out and start to have those heart conversations, like, what am I really feeling here? But also, know that there's discipline that needs to be involved to like keep the mind and body sharp.
Yeah, kind of like have the tenderness of the lover, but also the fierceness of the warrior. And different times we'll need different, but being able to access either based on the situation or where we're at within ourselves. It's probably the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the best books. Have y'all ever read the book called King, Warrior, Magician?
No.
I've heard of it, but I've never read it.
King, Warrior, Lover, Magician, something like that. I forget the author's name, but you can find it on Amazon. King, Warrior, Lover, Magician. Man, that's such a great book. It's not necessarily written in a airy-fairy spiritual context. It's more of a bit of a Jungian psychological approach, but practical. And you look at these 4 archetypes that you need to be a complete man. And it's written from, like, these are the masculine archetypes. So I love that.
Very cool.
But man, one of the best books. Like, we all need to be able to be a king in our lives. And they give you the 2 polarities of the tyrannical king and the immature king, and then the balanced king. Same thing for the warrior, same thing for the magician, same thing for the lover. Anyway, that's just a great book that serves up as a guiding, like, kind of guardrails. Like, okay, yeah, how am I a tyrannical, immature king, and how can I be better balanced for me in my life and therefore those around me?
Is that a big Paul Chek book?
That's a great question. I'm not sure if he's recommended that or not. It'd probably be surprising if he hasn't, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
Did you work with Paul? Is that right? Yeah, you're big into his stuff, right?
Yeah, so I started studying Paul Chek's stuff when I was 18. I would order his
so early
VHS tapes.
Wow.
Date myself a little bit. And I had just dropped out of college because I went for 3 months and realized this isn't for me. I don't know what is for me. But luckily, shortly thereafter, I got introduced to Paul Chek's work, studied his correspondence courses, took that really seriously. First time I ever was passionate about learning anything in my life. Then about a year later, took my first in-person class with Paul Chek. We developed a great relationship right from the get-go. About 3 years after that, he asked me if I'd move. I was living in Ohio, move out to San Diego to work with him at his institute. So I did that, ran my client practice. Then a couple of years after that, started teaching some of his courses. So yeah, I lived out there, worked with him every day for 10 years when I was in California. Yeah, he was major positive influence on my life.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was it about him that kind of drew you towards what he was teaching and preaching at the time?
Yeah, it's like he has a very charismatic personality. So, like, the character of him drew me in, where I could have heard other people talk about, like, the exercise science and been like, that's boring. It's good information, but it's boring. But his passion for it, and also the way he would break it down, he's got a great mind, his analogies. He just made so much make sense, presented in an entertaining way. So that's what drew me into his work initially.
Yeah, he's got so many really cool people that I feel like he's impacted. A few of our buddies in town are like Czech practitioners and have just followed some of his stuff. And I feel like he's a great archetype for guys to follow, just a curious guy who's able to like take his life learnings, which I feel like are mostly like not self-taught, but like there's just experimentation that he's clearly done that other people stray from.
Yeah, I don't know I don't think Paul graduated high school.
Really?
So he is very self-taught, and that's part of what
you can tell. It's like
that's part of what impressed the hell out of me. Like this was self-motivation. What he's created, his learnings, his teachings, that's all self-created, and that to me was a very something else that drew me in, because I graduated high school, not to brag, but like when I dropped out of college, there was still I think it's changed, but at least where I was from, there was still sort of the essence of, if you don't go to college, you're not going to amount to anything. And now I look at it like, well, if you want to amount to your potential, usually college won't help. It will in some cases, but so Paul was my first example of like, you just need to be your fucking self. That's all you need to be successful. Obviously hard work and learn useful stuff. But yeah, he definitely offered that.
That's cool.
It's amazing how many young people that think that they're bad students because they're just not interested in the college curriculum, where it's like you probably thought that, like, oh, I'm just not cut out for college. Maybe I'm not good at learning or whatever. And then you find something like Paul, you're going all in on it. You're doing the courses, you're teaching there. It's amazing how many people have similar stories just in different fields or whatever interests them too.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, and once I started being passionate about Paul's teachings and excelling at them, it confused me. I'm like, I didn't think I'd be good at this because I thought I was a bad student. But looking back, what I can see for myself was like, oh, I had actually like an ability to have an inability to learn about things that don't seem purposeful to me. So like, here's this advanced algebra in high school. I'm just shut off. Like I'll just try to copy off the guy next to me. I don't know what I'm doing because it didn't have a purpose to me. But when there's a purpose attached, then it makes sense. Now my brain is open, and look, it used to worry me, but then I learned to look at it like, oh, this is actually a beneficial filter system. I don't like learning about things that aren't purposeful to me.
Yeah. Would you say that some of the confidence that you got from Paul, or just things that you were doing from a health perspective at a young age, did that kind of give you a body of work to have the confidence to go into stand-up comedy?
Yeah, very much. One of the two things that Paul Chek directly gave me is probably the biggest gift. I saw the way he believed in me, and that taught me to better believe in myself to the degree that he does. So that was a huge thing. And then when I think I was 26 when I started teaching his holistic lifestyle coaching course. So it's a 3-day basically lecture, go to different cities, and that gave me a lot of exposure time of doing public speaking, being in front of people, sharing useful information. But you sit through a 24-hour lecture over a weekend, you're going to get bored real fast. So then also not only doing public speaking, but learning how to make people stay engaged. So that, that was thousands of hours I had essentially on stage doing that, which was a real solid foundation to then do a new craft. A lot of times the new craft of stand-up comedy, the biggest thing that people are freaked out about is they're in front of people.
Yes.
And they have to keep people's attention. It's like, I am not only comfortable with that, I love that.
You love that.
So that made learning the comedic art of stand-up comedy a lot easier because I wasn't having to learn two big things all at once. There was already that foundation I got from my experience with Paul Chek.
Were there any turning points for you early on where you were like, knew that this was something that you were going to pursue pretty heavily?
With stand-up specifically, I remember doing, I had no business doing stand-up when I started, just to be honest with you. I had built a following on YouTube, therefore I could like run shows and people come out to see me. I thought that's just how comedians started back in the day. I was wrong. That's how I started. So I remember my first real stand-up shows. It was a 3-city run, Boston, New York, and then Washington, D.C. over the course of 3 days. And I was just kind of like, this is either going to work or it's not going to work. I'm going to learn something here. And after the first show in Boston, if I look back at my material, I would cringe. It was objectively not good. But there was something there where I could feel. I remember writing my journal the next morning when I was flying to the next city, this is gold. Like, keep pursuing this. This is something really solid here. I could just feel it, and still need to and want to get a lot better at the craft of stand-up. But yeah, just after that first show, and especially the 3-show run, I knew, there's something solid here.
Is it something that's pretty easy to get addicted to? Like once you get up there and get comfortable?
Very much. isn't anything else I've experienced that gives me a rush with whether a club or a theater full of people, and it's just going well. It is such a feeling of connection where there might be 1,000 people and I feel like I'm in complete control. I know how to make them laugh. I've got them in the palm of my hand. It is a really beautiful feeling of connection. And then essentially the adrenaline rush of that, nothing like it. Now there's other things in life that are better, like putting my son to bed. Like that's a completely different feeling, and I would rate that's better and more important. But there is nothing like being on stage and you're crushing. So yes,
Wow.
it's addicting.
Yeah.
So the feeling of crushing a show way better than a video going super viral.
Oh, 100 times
100
better.
times better.
Like a video going viral, it's like, okay, that's a little bit of a dopamine hit. I'm happy that happened. Great. But like, you're just seeing numbers on a screen.
Right.
There's no human connection. But if it's hundreds or 1,000 people in a show, like that's real human energy that's being shared with. You're in an ocean of just beauty and joy. And of course the ego's like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty cool, aren't I?
Yeah.
But even outside of that, it's such a blessing, honestly, to be able to be the receiver and the conductor of all that real human connection all at one time. So nothing like it.
How would you describe that dance of like getting out on stage and getting that spark, like that energy going? Like if it doesn't work in the first 5 minutes, are you just like, oh, this is over?
It's way easier when it works well right from the get-go. And there's ways to facilitate that and increase the chances. Like you can control what you can control. Sometimes a crowd, like I find if the people sitting right up front, if they're disengaged for whatever reason, maybe it's like, the couple just got in a fight, they ain't gonna laugh at shit all day, or whatever reason. If the people up front are not alive, that kind of teaches the rest of the room, and the rest of the room gets entrained to that to a degree. So that's like a variable outside of my control. But the ones that I can control is, one, always do my best. Just like realizing people got babysitters to be here. They paid money to be here. They're taking their time to be here. I don't care what's going on in my life, or I've done 6 other shows this weekend. This is what really matters. So showing up fully. And then there's other techniques like creating rapport. Like I was just in Naples, Florida doing shows. So making local jokes, like observations since I've been in town. And that really tends to put shows in a good trajectory, because I think it makes people feel cared about. Like, oh, it took time to like notice something unique about my town, and then he roasts it or whatever he does. So that's a technique under my control to help better the chances of the rest of the show going well. Because the first, not even 5 minutes, but like 2 minutes of a show, it's like the childhood of the show. Just like what happens to us in our childhood, it doesn't dictate the rest of our lives, but it can influence it for sure. So that 2 minutes, that's the childhood of the show, and I do my best to control that, amongst other things.
With all the reps that you've put in, will you still kind of feel like that adrenaline rush, the nerves, the excitements during that 2 minutes? Like, does that ever go away, or is that just kind of, it is what it is, and you kind of ride the wave like a roller coaster? Yeah,
it does go away, and it changes. For me, it's replaced more with excitement.
Yes.
And sometimes like I do these Tony Robbins techniques backstage, because sometimes like first day in Naples, I'm doing shows on 3 hours of sleep. And if I had it my way, I would be home in bed before the show starts. So I do the state change, and then the feelings, it's more excitement. Like I'm sure my pulse is elevated. I'm sure there's adrenaline, but there's not a sense of like nervousness or anxiousness. It's more like excitement. And there's that's mixed with more of, I'd say, a strong feeling of confidence. Like, I got this.
Yes.
I got these people, because there's some proof of concept at this point where I've proven I can do it. So that helps, I think, channel maybe the same wattage of energy, just through a different lens, more the lens of excitement and like, I'm gonna go get these people.
Yeah. That feeling is almost like life encapsulated in a single moment. And like what I've been doing, because we do more public speaking with the show, almost training myself to think, if I don't have this feeling, I'm not doing the right things in my life. Like trying to seek out that feeling, as uncomfortable as it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think if you show up just like, hey, what's up, guys? Happy to be here. Your pulse is just 64.
Oh, can you imagine?
You may not be showing up with effort and engagement.
Yeah.
There's a decent chance. So I love how you look at that.
Yeah.
What's kind of next for you with the comedy stuff? Are there new heights that you're trying to go to with that?
Yeah, good question. Not really. Like I find when I try to make plans, reality works out better if I follow my heart rather than creating plans. So there's a couple new things. They're not necessarily like amplifying the comedy. Like, let's get to the Joe Rogan level of selling out arenas. Like, nah. I mean, if that accidentally happens, great, but that's not like the ambition or the next step. But a couple things that are next for me is, one, expanding my channel to let it be a platform for other awesome people that are highly curated. So, for example, my friend Brent Pella, great comedian, recently moved here to Austin. He's now doing a weekly comedic news show on my channel, and I'm still doing all my content, and he's got his YouTube channel. There's just more eyeballs on mine. So it's like, cool, I want to give Brent more exposure, and that'll also strengthen my channel, get him more followers. So great win-win arrangement. So doing things like that, expanding my comedy beyond just me. And then also end of September, I've got my first, I don't know what we call it, non-comedy live event doing here in Austin. And it's not a comedy show. It's truly for freedom lovers who want to learn how to channel their desire for change in their lives and communities and future for their kids and grandkids into an effective place. So those events, we're doing like 3-hour long evening events. There will be some comedy. Brent's going to be performing. There's going to be meaningful conversation, practical direction, and also community, where it's going to be a sea of like-minded people. So there's an opportunity for folks to not feel like they're isolated or lonely, but for people to find their people. So that's new on the roadmap. We've got our first one, and hopefully it goes well. If so, we'll duplicate it in other cities. And right now we're getting a lot of interest. So I think it's setting the stage for it to go well.
I hope it's you in a suit just ranting for 2 hours like Jordan Peterson.
Well, no, let me tell you about the Bible.
We went to that. Did you go to the live event that he did a couple months ago?
I didn't.
At the Moody?
No.
It was so incredible because you saw him speak like right after he was sick.
Yeah, so I think it was January 2022, and he just like was not looking great. And I was like, oh man, he's like, seems like he's either sick or just really gassed from touring. And then, yeah.
And he had this like incredible vigor when we saw him a couple months ago. Like it almost seemed like he had a couple bullet points in his head, but then when he was speaking to the audience, he was like having realizations and new thoughts and thinking through topics while on stage. And it was like literally almost 2 hours of him just communicating that to the audience. And it was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen.
It was like Da Vinci painting like right in front of you.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah, it was
cool. Yeah, and how unique, because when he's doing his tour, I'd imagine, like you said, he's got, here's the bullet points I want to cover, but the uniqueness, because he's used to talking in front of people, one of the smartest minds alive, but when he just lets his hand organically paint what wants to be painted. It's like you're not going to find that show anywhere else. So I'd imagine it's very special.
Yeah, and it's going to be so cool for you too to do this show and like flex these different chops. Where obviously a lot of people know you for the comedy, but there's the courage that we talked about, the sovereignty, the freedom mindset. I think it's cool to just put yourself out there, and I feel like people are going to love it, and you're just going to be doing it in more cities, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. To me, comedy, it's never been the goal. The comedy is just a language to communicate a more meaningful message. And I, of course, still do the comedy, but it's like, I want to reach people at other levels as well.
Yeah.
Is that an optimistic view of the future? I mean, you're clearly building and creating like that space, the venues for people to come together. So clearly there's some optimism at the base.
Instead of building a bunker.
Yeah, exactly.
By the Amish.
Yeah. I'd be curious what y'all think about the future. I am optimistic and also realistic. So I do believe things will get worse before they get better. What the timeline is, hopefully it's short, but I do have so much hope for the future. And in fact, if I didn't, I wouldn't try to contribute to the betterment of, people awakening. Instead, I would just, I'll selfishly spend my time getting all my food supply, the bunker, and 100,000 rounds of ammo. That's what I would be doing if I didn't have hope. So humanity is resilient. The way I see the forces of opposition against humanity, the tyranny of different corrupt people in positions of power, corporations, government, it looks almost unbeatable because you look at what they control. They control the mainstream media. They control the TV networks. They control big tech. They control governments. They control the law to an extent. Pharmaceutical companies, like, what do we have that can possibly match that? At the end of the day, I believe we have God on our side, and that's so powerful that you can't measure it. So you can almost trick yourself into believing it's powerless because it's not perceptible. You can't measure it in dollars or influence. So I do believe people who are on the side of humanity, and freedom is synonymous with humanity, I believe we have God on our side, and I believe God's way always wins. The only question is, what's the timeline? And I think we can accelerate that timeline the more each of us as individuals set aside our ego and its needs for security, significance, and certainty, and open ourselves up to channel not what we want, but what wants to live through us, which I think is God's will. So I think we are the channels that bring that into the world, and it's under our control. So I have hope.
Beautifully said. Yeah, the hope in relationship to God breeds that perseverance, and the perseverance breeds the character that we need to change the things that we see in the world that are seemingly going astray every single day. But yeah, this conversation in itself is, I think, a sign of hope for a lot of people. We're able to talk about these topics and do our small part.
Yeah. And also, if we turn into a communist wasteland, it won't be so bad. We get to all live like we're Amish, because that's the only option, and that might not be so bad.
In the gulag.
In the gulag, yeah. There's some negatives, Brett. You're right.
Yeah.
We'll all be hanging out in the gulag.
Started with penises, ended with gulag. So it's perfect bookend.
Full circle.
Yeah.
But brother, thanks for making people laugh. Thanks for speaking your truth. Thanks for doing the show. It's just so cool to get to know you, and just excited to see what comes next, man.
Oh, heck yeah.
Thank
Honor
you,
to
brother.
be here with you guys. Thank you for having me on.